My mom always says that my superpower is being kind to people. And so if you take like all the superpowers in the world, that's probably the worst one to have. No cape, no strength, no super brains or anything.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another very special episode of Experts Unleashed, episode number 142. And in today's episode, I'm excited because I'm going to be chatting with Jordan Jewkes, founder and managing attorney of the Jewkes Firm. I'm excited to dive into our conversation here in just a moment. Now, Jordan is the founder and managing attorney of the Jewkes Firm, a results-driven personal injury law firm serving clients across Georgia. With nearly 2 decades of legal experience, Jordan has an insurance defense background to level the playing field for victims of car accidents, trucking crashes, slip and falls, wrongful death, and medical malpractice. His clients benefit from a strategy-driven approach that anticipates insurance tactics and aggressively pursues maximum compensation. His firm has obtained some of the highest results in the South Atlanta area. Jordan, welcome, my man. Excited to have you.
Joel, thank you so much. That was a nice introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to spending a few minutes talking with you.
Well, I think in your bio that I read, I think the one thing that really stands out is that you have an insurance defense background. Can you give us a little context about how that shapes the way that you approach your clients here today and their cases?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, by way of a little bit of background, I went to law school in Atlanta. And coming out of law school, most of the law firms that were recruiting me were the big insurance defense firms, big corporate law firms in Atlanta. And that's kind of a very natural thing that happens, and so I ended up joining a law firm in Atlanta that mostly represented some of the largest insurance companies in the world. I won't name who they are specifically, but for sure you've heard about them. And for sure, especially if you're from the Atlanta area, you'd be familiar with some of the clients that we represented. And some of the biggest, most brand recognizable clients in the area. And so I spent the first couple of years out of law school just representing these clients, and most often, honestly, in the workers' compensation context. So if someone got injured at work, we would defend those claims. And so there were some claims that were outside of the workers' comp context. We call that the claims that I do mostly now, which is what we call liability or just regular personal injury claims. We did some of that, but in any event, So spent a couple of years daily communicating with the partners at that firm, was strategizing on how to defend against claimants' injury claims, right? People who are claiming an injury and trying to make an insurance claim, and trying to strategize alongside and in lockstep with insurance adjusters and insurance representatives whose main goal was to minimize those claims, was to not figure out how to not pay them out. So that's what I did for almost exclusively a couple of years right out of law school. And, I learned personally pretty quickly that that was fantastic experience for what I wanted to do. But my moral compass, honestly, did not quite align up with how the insurance company viewed and typically tried to handle these claims. And I found myself time and again wondering why the insurance company wouldn't just pay. And I viewed the claim as an honest claim. And sometimes we would advise, by just very generally, we would tell, the adjuster or write a memo and say, hey, we think this is a legitimate claim. We probably need to pay it. And the response we more often than not got was, well, you have, a very limited amount based on what you're recommending to actually pay this claim. In other words, no matter the validity of the claim, we found that the insurance company more often than not, I found that they were trying to deny the claim or minimize it. And that's when my career, my sort of philosophy about what I wanted to do took a change, and I started representing people that have been injured.
Was there a defining moment that you can remember where that light bulb moment, that switch flipped in your mind of like, hey, I'm on the wrong side of the table here? Right? Is there anything that comes to your mind, like a specific instance that you can remember? I don't know if you can name a case. We obviously don't keep all names, out of it, but like, is there a specific situation that caused that switch to flip in your mind? It's like, I need to go on the other side.
I mean, I don't know that there was one case. I mean, I mean, honestly, Joel, there were a lot of cases where the insurance company had, I felt like, a very honorable role where I felt like we were doing a good job. There were several times where we uncovered legitimate fraud, being attempted to be perpetrated, in my opinion, by claimants, people who were claiming an injury.
Yeah.
But then they were out on the weekends doing very, very active things, working a second or third job, very active. And on those ones, I felt, we have legitimate work. We really do need to defend this. And that was noble and the right thing to do in many occasions. But more often than not, we were representing or fighting against people who were legitimately injured. And I know I can tell you one industry that we did represent was the roofing industry. So we represented a lot of roofers. And sometimes the roofers who were injured were Hispanics, low income people. I would say are generally disenfranchised and often didn't have lawyers to advocate for them and often had very serious injuries. And they would fall off a roof and sometimes it was a broken leg. Sometimes it was much worse. And even on those cases where there was very clear they were injured while at work and were entitled to a sizable claim, the insurance company still very hard, really encouraged us and pushed us to minimize those claims and to, just try and undercut what should be a very, very clear-cut case and to, minimize this poor roofer's claim so that he couldn't provide for his family really, or even if he went back to work, he couldn't do the same job. And the insurance company would push us to lower those as low as they possibly can, when sometimes those are the very worst possible types of injuries you can suffer on a work site, falling off a house and having multiple broken bones and not head injuries and just really kind of terrible things. So enough of those, honestly, Joel. And I was like, this just isn't quite what I want to do long term.
So when you made that decision to switch, did you start the Jewkes Firm right away, or did you transition in another way? Like what happened after that point?
Yeah. So I started looking for other work, to be 100% honest. And, gosh, this was 15 years ago. But, I tend to think that everything you do in life is 50% skill and 50% luck, right? And that tends to be my own career choices have kind of followed that pattern. But I am from the south side of Atlanta. I live just outside of I kind of live in Noonan, Georgia, but there was a firm in Peachtree City, Georgia, which was 10, 15 minutes from my house at the time, that just so happened to be a plaintiff's medical malpractice firm. And they were also looking to hire someone, which was really kind of lucky at the time. And so right place, right time for me. And at the time I had been commuting an hour into Atlanta, every day, which, and so from a lawyer's perspective, and there's many industries that do this. At the time when I was working for the insurance company, we were billing by the hour, right? You had to bill 2,000 hours a year, 180 hours a month, which may not seem like a ton of time, but when you add in your commute time and the actual hours that you're working in a day, it's sometimes hard to meet that. And so a lot of people get exhaustion from that. And I was one of those. And so I was kind of looking for something that, again, aligned a little bit more with my personal moral compass, but also that would give me a little bit more flexibility in the hours and in my day. And I was I was married, I was young and didn't have any kids yet, but I had one on the way. And so I ended up putting my resume into this law firm in Peachtree City, Georgia, that did about 75% medical malpractice, and which is when you bring a lawsuit against a doctor. We also did a lot of more general car wreck, slip and fall type claims. And so I ended up putting a resume in, and the associate that was doing most of the hiring, he liked something on my resume that was it was basically what we call mock trial or mock court work. Mm-hmm. So in law school, I had won a national championship doing mock trial works, where that's where you bring in all these schools compete on a fake case. and it's judged by real judges. The real judges are sitting judges in Fulton and Atlanta and other areas, and they determine which school had the best advocates and tried this fake case the best. And so we had won a national championship doing that, and the associate at this firm in Peachtree City noticed that because he had also, frankly, been to the same school and was on some of the same, kind of generational teams. And he reached back and said, "Hey, the timing is good. You may have just hit a little bit of a jackpot here." And so he liked my resume. He was interested in my insurance defense background, and of course my mock trial experience. And that was a litigating firm, really, truly. And so they welcomed me on board. That was I want to say 2010-ish, 2011 maybe. And then I started working for a firm there, again, doing 75% medical malpractice, but also really cutting my teeth on just your very basic rear end type car wrecks, slip and falls, dog bites, those types of things, and really had some good experiences there.
You mentioned your moral compass, right? And how that has played a role in, your background and who you serve here today. Give me a little bit more context as to the lessons learned from being on the defense side, seeing some of these disenfranchised plaintiffs who are just trying to really do the right thing. Obviously, there's fraud, but how has your moral compass kind of shaped who you serve here today?
Right, and if I think that's a really good question, Joel, and what I would say is more often than not, it comes down to people versus profits. And I guess let me say this. I come from a large family. I'm one of 11 kids, and so I kind of grew up having to be a little bit more scrappy and it's very often seen as sort of I don't want to insult my parents at all, because I had the best parents in the world growing up, but I was one of 11, and so I just had to fight a little bit sometimes to get noticed, if that makes sense. And so I've always had a appreciation a little bit for the underdog and for the person that maybe doesn't have all the opportunities that maybe some others may. And I felt like on the insurance defense side, it was more often trying to preserve corporate profits and the bottom line on some ledger that ultimately ended up in New York or something, and with some executive somewhere. And I felt like that was most often done at the expense of humans, right? And and at human expense, I would say. And I just that never fit right. I mean, there are some circumstances where I said, yeah, this is a right thing, where there's clearly fraud and someone I think really wasn't injured. And so when I that started to really, be difficult just internally for me in my mind and my heart, and I didn't enjoy it, and I couldn't get passionate about preserving corporate profits. That's really the best way I think I can describe it. And even in valid cases, just minimizing, the real harms and losses done to human beings. It was just tough for me. And often I'd sit across from these people representing the insurance company. I'd look at this, and it was a mother, making a claim, and she was a single mom, very valid claim. And that's just a hard thing to do. And I think it takes a certain amount of steel to be able to do that. And I didn't think that was something that I wanted to use my law degree and my skills, my God-given talents to do. And so my heart, my emotions, I just aligned more with being able to connect with humans on a very human level. And I think that's really where I found a lot of success in my life now. This is going to sound really cheesy, Joel, but my mom always says that my superpower is being kind to people. And so if you take like all the superpowers in the world, that's probably the worst one to have. I mean, like, no cape, no strength, no super brains or anything. She just would always tell me, hey, you're really nice to people. And usually it was in the context of people who are a little underprivileged. But that is, I have to give my mom a ton of credit, because I think that makes me a little bit more successful now. Just seeing people for who they are, not judging them. And so that's where my personality, my my strength is, I think, is just relating to people and helping tell their human story and how they've been affected.
I think you've got a potential book in you when the title is "My Mom Says That I'm Kind to People."
I don't think anyone would read it though.
Man. Okay. A couple of things that I wanted that came to mind as I heard you telling those stories. You know, I wanted to ask you, is there a specific playbook that you see insurance companies run that you can now spot from a mile away, or that it's going to happen, like as you're working with your clients now on the other side? Um, what are some of the things, like if somebody is injured right now, what are some of the things that they should be aware of that you can say, hey, listen, this is what we know they're going to be doing this, and just to raise their awareness level? Like, what are some of those playbooks or tactics that they tend to use that you've gained from being on that other side?
Yeah, if you have been through an accident or a serious injury on your own, you'll see this. But one of the very first things, I will say it really comes down to what we call the 3 Ds: deny, defend, and delay. And that was a very real thing on the get-go. I mean, we would sit down in attorney strategy meetings and review a whole book of new cases, a book of new files, and we would go over them with the partner at the big firm, and as we would talk about and go over the firms, and sometimes there were assignments being made to each attorney. Hey, you handle these 3 or these 4. It was almost, we would go over, and it was our responsibility as associates to sort of bring the partner up to speed on these files that we'd initially come across and were sent over by the insurance company. And without fail, I mean, the first thing out of his mouth was, or tended to be, oh, that claim is BS. Oh, this is BS. And then the next thing is, well, how do we defend that? And more specifically, to answer your question, Joel, it would be, let's send them to Dr. A or Dr. B or Dr. C, who we knew were incredibly defense oriented, where they would see someone who was run over by a car and would say, oh, that's a pre-existing injury he's had. He didn't really, he may have been run over, but it didn't cause any injuries. And so we knew who those doctors were lined up, and you would say, we'll make sure that this injured roofer, who's fallen off a roof and had broken legs, went to see this doctor who would say, his legs were really frail, and he would have broken them just walking down the street the next day, no matter what. And it sounds comical, and you're like, for an outsider person, you think, do doctors like that really exist? But 100%, there are doctors out there who love the paycheck from the insurance companies to do these medical exams over and over and over again, and they love it so much they will say whatever really the insurance company wants them to say. So. Deny, defend, delay. That's a mantra you hear and see all the time, and then find the right doctor. So maybe you call it the 4 Ds is really the strategy you see.
It's very sad. I think it can definitely shift your perspective and shift your view on certain industries in a very negative light.
Yeah, you get jaded very quickly if you start to uncover some of the shenanigans, I'll just say. And and Joel, honestly, there are lawyers on my side who try and find those doctors who've never seen someone who was not injured, right? Hey, they were an offender bender, no paint scratches. Yes, they need surgery. Get them surgery tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. You want to use fair doctors who are going to call it how it is. And that's how we try and run our practice and be authentic with people. Anyway, but yeah, there's you can get jaded on both sides if you really need to or want to.
I think that's the perfect word, is jaded. And have you, when you started to feel those first senses of jade, did you have any sort of like regret getting into this field, into this industry in general? Like you experienced like, what did I get myself into? Like, is this, you peeled behind the curtain and it's like, is this the Wizard of Oz? Like, is this really what I'm getting myself into? Like, did you ever have those thoughts, those conversations?
Oh yeah. I mean, when I was in law school is very difficult. And you'd go to your classes, and like any graduate program, I mean, I don't know that there was anything particularly special or grueling about law school. It was very difficult. You'd spend a lot of time in the library and studying with your groups and really trying to, very competitive. Maybe that's what made it a little more grueling, is it was not pass or fail. It was definitely, you wanted to get A's in as many classes as you could. And if it meant you did better than your fellow, students, and they did a little worse, there was a system that almost rewarded that. But I remember at the time, one of my brother-in-laws, he married my sister, obviously, and he was in dental school. And I just thought, man, maybe I took the wrong way out. But I mean, certainly, I remember very clearly sitting in my desk in law school thinking one time, man, I may have gone into the wrong profession. My mom says I'm a really nice guy. I enjoy working with my hands. Maybe I should just quit law school and go to dental school. That was probably the low point of law school, I think, midway through my first year. But certainly working with the insurance companies, there were some low points there. But I do remember there was a case we took before a judge, and this was there was a lot of times we had to go to court and argue some things in front of this judge. And this was probably talk about being jaded. That there was this particular judge, and I would never say what her name but she, you could tell her that the sky was blue all day long. We could go outside and look and say, oh yeah, we can all see that the sky is blue. And then she would make a ruling that said the sky was actually red. And Joel, and working with someone like that, and judges in our industry, they hold all their cards, right? And the only way you can overcome them is by filing an appeal. And so I had just joined this firm in Peachtree City. We had this fantastic client, and I thought we had a fantastic case. My partner, the partner at the firm, said, Jordan, you take this case. It's yours, prove yourself, et cetera, et cetera. I thought I did a great job. And certainly we made this argument in front of the judge, and she came around and said, the sky's red in our case. That was the ruling she made. And the partner at the time said, well, I just said, there's no explanation for this. We can all go out and see that she's wrong on this. I mean, we can visually see. It's just she's read the facts, and then she's almost made up her own facts. I don't know how else to describe it. So we went to the Court of Appeals. It took 6 months, another $10,000 in costs. It was expensive. I spent a lot of time at the Court of Appeals and poring over transcripts and court records. And then we wrote this long article, this long paper, and did all these little, what we call blue book citations and all these things. And like the worst research paper you've ever had to write, and the font had to be the right size. The line on each page had to be the right size, and did all this thing. And it was immaculate. The Court of Appeals read it. They read the defense attorney's, response to what I wrote, and they ruled in my favor. And they said, the judge got it wrong. Go back in front of this judge and she's going to argue. She's going to, basically told the judge that I was right. And so we went back in front of the judge, and she ruled the exact same way as she did the first time. And I just said, you know what, I'm done. And I said, I'm never bringing a case in front of this judge again. And so we ended up settling the case for less than what we should have. But that was a point where I was like, you know what, I can do everything I can. I can advocate as much as I can for my clients. But if the judge is going to decide he or she's going to rule against me, there's very little control I have over that. But at the same time, I will say that the silver lining to that, Joel, is that's really the only time that's ever happened in my career. And so coming on 20 years of doing this and litigating, most judges are actually really fair. They want to do the right thing. And in the face of good arguments and good facts, they'll do the right thing. And that's very reassuring. So that was really kind of an isolated event.
Yeah. Well, that judge sounds like my 9-year-old son. So that's why I was laughing, because
I got a 10-year-old son, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
They're just so strong-willed. You can't convince him any other way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jordan, is there, we talked about the jaded side, right? But there's also the other side now where, you do the right thing, and you can, now that you're working with these clients against these insurance companies, tell me about a client where they were probably at the lowest point of their entire life. They just experienced something horrific, and it's just totally life-altering, life-changing, lowest point of their life. What was their situation, and what was the resolution like, where at the end of it, you could really see, like, regardless of whatever the financial outcome was, but like you saw the downstream effect of what your work really does for people. Do any stories come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will tell you, that's the best part of my job. I mean, day in
Mm-hmm.
and day out, it's exactly what you've just described. And it's finding people, really, they come to us at their lowest point and they say, I mean, so we represent people who've been injured and, through no fault of their own, and typically in car wrecks or sometimes slip and falls and occasionally like a medical malpractice case, but usually it's pretty significant cases. And they come to us in the exact scenario that you've just described. They've been pushed into the corner. There's an incredible inconvenience associated with a car wreck. Your car is destroyed. You can't get to work. You're having to go to the repair shop. You're having to run around, get Uber. I mean, your family's wondering how food's going to put on their table. All these things are going on, and then you've got this physical pain that is associated with it all. And most people that have been in that process have no desire to hire an attorney. Hiring an attorney is the last thing they want to do because they just don't want to be litigious. And I get that. That's how most people here are in Georgia. So most people that I consult with that come and reach out to me are in some type of similar situation. I will share an example of one that comes to mind that we recently resolved a case with. This was a gentleman who came to us several months after being in a car wreck, and he had been driving down, I wouldn't say a country road, but maybe a little bit of a more rural route here in Georgia. He was in a truck. He came to a complete stop, and another truck behind him just didn't see him, right, and smashed in the back of him, and my client's truck looked like almost an accordion had hit it, and to make matters worse, when he got hit, his head snapped back and actually shattered out the rear window or the rear cab window of his truck. And, the poor guy he didn't want to claim he was injured. I think he was 65 at the time. He gets out of his car and he's like, "Hey, everyone, I'm fine. He had like blood and glass in the back of his head. And everyone's looking at him like, "Are you sure? Like, call the ambulance." But he goes from the scene saying, "Hey, really, I'm fine. I'm okay." But long story short, 6 years later, he'd have several injections, $100,000 worth of everything from chiropractic to pain injections. And a guy that would never, ever have wanted to be in that situation. Again, through no fault of his own, his life had changed. His wife says, one of the very first times we sit down, she says, my husband's not the same guy. Like, he's a different person than when I married. And we've been married for 40 years. He's more irritable. He started drinking. He started cursing like a sailor. This wasn't the guy I married. And so we had this element of not just the physical pain, but also the mental pain. And it was very real. His friends were all on the same page. This guy's not the same. And so we filed suit when the insurance company didn't want to help the guy. I mean, they were basically offering the amount of his medical bills, totally discounting the permanent nature of any of his injuries, totally discounting the mental changes that his wife and even he had said, I know I miss events. My calendar is a mess because I can't remember anything. And the insurance company just didn't want to pay him. And so we ended up going to trial on that case. And his doctors came, his chiropractor, he had a physiatrist come and who's sort of a physical pain and medicine doctor to say, hey, look, this is where the pain sources are coming from. This is what he had a vertigo, which is sort of a spinning sensation in his ear or his inner ear. And it took 6 years to go to trial. And we ended up trying the case in Butts County, which is a really very conservative county here in South Georgia. And the jury listened to him. They listened to the human story. He had all the credibility in the world. He's the nicest man in the world. And my clients were very nervous going into that. And Joel, they were frankly wanted to settle it. And they kept saying, Jordan, because the insurance company's offers started getting a little bit more and more and more as we crept closer to trial. And on the day of trial, they offered us a good amount of money, but the clients, were very tempted to take that. And I tried to tell them, we've done a lot of work. We've researched this. We ended up going in front of the jury, and the jury gave us just under $2 million, $1.9 million. And the money was great, but the the change and my clients were ecstatic, and the money wasn't, the money was a validation that what they had been through was genuine, and that the insurance company was wrong, and that their life experiences were real, and that a jury of 12 people, even in a podunk town in Georgia, could see that, and they could listen to and relate to my clients. And so at the end of it, they were just happy to have won. And the money side was fantastic, but just to be able to say the jury listened to us, and our claims for the last 6 years have now been legitimized, and we've not been faking this, and this is real, and it really has changed our life. That's really sort of the penultimate experience that we have as trial lawyers, to help people through that process. And that was a very rewarding one, and probably the most recent one that I've really had that was sizable.
Well, I want to highlight something that you said, which I think is very revealing. You said that most people don't want to litigate, right? They want to avoid it. How often is that the case when someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I'm really just kind of curious, or, maybe that's not the conversation that you have, but how often do you have those conversations where people are like, I really don't want to go down this path. I just kind of want to forget it, or I just want to take whatever the easy scenario is. Like, how often do you have those conversations, or how often is that in the back of your clients' minds, or your potential clients' minds? Because that they don't want to litigate. Like, it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, Joel, I'd say most of the time. I mean, I don't know many clients that come in saying, hey, we're going to go, I'm not accepting ever an offer that they ever make. I have no intention of seeking offer. I just want to go straight to court. That's actually exceedingly rare. And so most clients that come in have been backed into a corner. They're reaching out out of some sense of desperation to just have some level of closure. And usually they've talked to a friend, or they've done a little research on Google, or maybe they've looked up YouTube to find, a podcast with someone talking about how to resolve it on their own. Like, how do I just get this monkey off my back? And so, they talk to a friend or something, and a friend or family member recommends a trusted attorney, and they end up going to that attorney. And so that's usually the case, is people are tired of being hassled. They're tired of the inconvenience, and they really want closure with the pain. They want their pain to go away is a really big deal. And most of them will say, I would say 90% of them say on my very first visit, because I always tell them, like, hey, I can't ever guarantee you a recovery. I can't guarantee you a certain amount of money, but I'll tell you, I'll do everything I can in my power if I think you have a legitimate case to try and win it for you. And most of them at that point will say something to the effect of, the money isn't what I'm doing this for. I want closure. I want to be heard, and the insurance company's not hearing me. So I need someone to get out there and tell my story who's not going to back down. That's really what it comes down to. So most of them don't want to go through the litigation process. They want to just settle. They want to go back to their job. They want to go back to their families, to their kids' baseball games, and put this thing behind them.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's very important to hear that, because I think there's probably a lot of people that question, like, what they should be doing and which path is right for them. But no matter what, they're stuck with the injuries. They're stuck with the pain. They're stuck with that mental, emotional, and physical disruption that's probably going to be with them for life or the foreseeable future, depending on the severity.
Yeah.
Jordan, let me ask you this. After nearly 2 decades of doing this work, what do you believe about personal injury law now that you didn't believe maybe 10 years ago? How has your perspective started to shift over the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think I would say that the most important thing that I can do as a lawyer is to lean into my clients and to tell their story as a human being. Ultimately, obviously we go into our different careers to try and provide, right? And I've got a family. I've got 4 kids. My oldest son's about to graduate from high school and go on to college and do all those things. And he's going to be independent soon. And I want to set a good example for him professionally and financially and all those types of things. And obviously be a good father. But obviously we do things on a professional level for some monetary benefit. and to me, that was my primary motivating factor for a long time. But in recent years, I've discovered that when you focus on the human being, on the client, and really truly try and meet their needs, that makes everything else worth it and makes everything else come together at the end. And every single one of my clients has a unique story. They are people who've endured things that I would never want to endure. They've been in situations that I would never want to. And more often than not, the insurance companies are they're just trying to save money. And when I'm lucky to be able to do what I do, because I go in front of a jury of 12 people, citizens out of our local communities who more often than not don't want to be there, but are willing to be there, which is very noble. And they are humans, and they are willing to listen and to reward those who they find are credible. And so I love being able to just tell that person's story, to be able to get the jury to relate to them. And when I'm able to do that more often than not, we get the number or close to it that we're asking for. In other words, the money happens. I don't need to be so worried about the financial aspect of it, because the story's been told and the jury more often than not relates to that story. And it's maybe sound oversimplistic, but that's what I think is really the key in what we do, is to focus on that human story, that human element.
Yeah. Well, I think that comes out very naturally and very clearly just in this conversation about how much you do care and the passion behind it. And so I know that my listeners will also hear that.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Jordan, how do your best clients usually find their way to your firm currently?
I don't know. How do I define a best client? I'll tell you what we do. We try and be involved in our community. We try and network with others that are good people, that are hardworking, that are trusted. And more often than not, the clients, they come in because we've gotten a good result for a former client or a family member, and they refer to us personally. We've got good relationships with some of the chiropractors in the area who will refer folks to us, but most often we try and be the person in our community that we want to surround ourselves with, someone who's trusted and work hard. And we're going to be here for a while. We're all from Georgia. We're all from this area of Georgia. And so just getting out and making ourselves known and doing really top tier service to our clients is, in my opinion, always the best marketing.
Love it. Very cool. All right. Last question, Jordan, and then we will wrap up. I like to put my coaching hat on here. I've got about 15 years of coaching experience, but I like to ask this question 10 years from now. Okay. When someone says the Jewkes Firm, what do you want the first thing to be out of their mouth to be? How do you want to be known 10 years from now?
Trusted, without question. Folks that are going to do what they say they're going to do what they say. And people that you can rely on, and whether it's whether your case is worth $1 million or not, we're going to treat the case like it's worth $1 million. So if you hire us, you're going to be able to trust that we're going to go to bat for you and work as hard as we can for you. Without question that we want to be the most trusted firm in the Atlanta area and South Atlanta, certainly.
Love it. Well, Jordan, I've enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was very, I thought it was very intriguing, very insightful, and very inspirational to know how you came from the other side of the table, took that experience, use your moral compass to guide you to the next stage. And now you can use that background, and that you have been using that background and that experience to serve your clients in a respectable, trusted way. So anything you want to share before we wrap up? Where can people find you?
Hey, thank you, Joel. I really appreciate that. And again, thank you for having me. You can find us on the web at jewkesfirm.com, JEWKES firm.com. And we're always happy to reach out and give free consultations. But yeah, we're here in South Atlanta. We have 3 offices. We love what we do. We love the communities that we serve. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, that'll wrap it up today for today's episode of Experts Unleashed. Make sure you go reach out to Jordan, tell him you found him on the show, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me.